Table 12. The singles table. The reject table. That's where I found myself, wedged between the leftover cousins I barely knew and a guy whose main skill seemed to be over-cheerfully spilling his drink on the tablecloth. Lily, my sister, looked radiant somewhere across the room, glowing like the center of a carefully curated social media feed, while I sat here feeling like a cautionary tale. Chicago's skyline gleamed outside the banquet hall windows, but inside, the golden lights and sparkling chandeliers couldn't warm the chill of embarrassment that wrapped around me. The room smelled like expensive perfume, fresh-cut roses, and a faint undertone of tension, the kind you can almost taste. This was supposed to be a celebration of love, but for me, it was a full-blown showcase of inadequacy. Ever since I could remember, Lily had enjoyed playing the starring role, and I'd been cast as the supporting character, preferably invisible. Today, the script was cruelly familiar. She was the bride, the queen, and the benchmark for everything I supposedly wasn't. Every laugh that floated across the tables, every whisper of admiration for her hair, her dress, her choices, felt like it was aimed at me too, a reminder of my single status, my perceived failure. I clenched my fork, my knuckles white against the fine china. I wasn't usually the dramatic type. Okay, maybe a little, but there's something about being reduced to a punchline in front of family and strangers alike that makes it hard to breathe. I was here in my seat, but in that moment, I wasn't really part of the wedding at all. My name is Iris Williams, and if you've never been the other sister, consider yourself lucky. Growing up with Lily was like living in the shadow of a living highlight reel. She had a way of making everything she touched look effortless. Grades, boys, even our parents' attention, while I was supposed to quietly marvel from the sidelines. Ever since she got engaged to Andre, she'd made it her personal mission to remind me that I was 32 and still single, as if my love life, or lack thereof, were some national tragedy she had to announce at family gatherings. Family gatherings were a battlefield of microaggressions disguised as concern. When are you going to settle down, Iris? Or are you really going to wear that to the wedding? Lily's questions weren't innocent. They were sharp, precise, designed to cut just enough to leave me aware of my place. And let's not even start with the subtle comparisons she'd toss around, like measuring my life against hers with that thinly veiled smirk. It wasn't just Lily. Our family, bless them, had perfected the art of polite cruelty. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They all knew the rules. Celebrate the bride, admire her choices, and never, ever overshadow her. I learned early on that being the funny, smart, independent one didn't earn applause. It earned eye rolls and awkward chuckles, as if my strengths were inconvenient interruptions in Lily's carefully curated story. So here I was, dressed in a gown that hugged in all the wrong ways, pretending not to notice the stares, the whispers, the laughter that followed me like an invisible soundtrack. I had mastered the art of survival in my sister's orbit, but surviving wasn't the same as thriving. And deep down, I wondered if thriving was even allowed. The morning of the wedding started like any other, except every little thing felt heavier. My phone buzzed, and of course it was Lily. Just try not to look too miserable in the photos, okay? She chirped, as if she were reminding me to water a plant that was already wilted. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond with sarcasm or throw it across the room. I settled on ignoring it. I moved around my apartment like I was walking on eggshells, carefully avoiding mirrors that would remind me of the self-conscious single sister I was expected to be. The thought of facing her, radiant and adored, while I felt like an unwelcome shadow, twisted my stomach. Every step toward the wedding felt like marching into a gladiator arena in heels that were clearly designed to punish me. By the time I slid into the dress I'd spent weeks debating over, the nerves were almost unbearable. The fabric clung in all the wrong ways, and I could already hear the whispers in my head, real and imagined, about how I didn't belong at the same table as Lily's friends and family. I took a deep breath, trying to summon calm, but it was like breathing underwater. Today wasn't about me. Today was about Lily. And me? I was just supposed to survive it. I walked into the banquet hall, hoping the golden lights and sparkling chandeliers might disguise my nerves, but no such luck. The moment I was guided to table 12, the singles table, I felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Table 12. The reject table. Not a name anyone had to say out loud. Everyone just knew. Family members approached with those tight-lipped smiles and the obligatory small talk that barely hid judgment. "So, Iris, anyone special in your life?" asked Aunt Renee, leaning a little too close. "Not yet," I mumbled, my voice steady even though my chest was tightening. Lily's friends flitted by, throwing compliments at her in passing, eyes flicking toward me with a mixture of pity and amusement. Then came the unsolicited advice. "Maybe try online dating? Have you thought about that new singles brunch? You'll find someone, eventually." The laughter that followed felt like glass scraping against my skin. I forced a polite smile, clenching my hands under the table so no one would see them shake. And just when I thought I could sink into my chair unnoticed, it was bouquet toss time. The photographer called everyone to the dance floor. "All the single ladies," someone shouted. I froze as my family's eyes landed on me, a mixture of expectation and subtle mockery. Lily gave a little wink, the kind that said, "This is your moment, Iris. Don't ruin it." I barely moved, caught between wanting to run and the ridiculous social obligation to participate. The bouquet sailed past me, and someone else caught it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but the humiliation lingered, settling into my bones. I sat back, head down, feeling simultaneously invisible and entirely exposed. This was the world Lily thrived in, and I was just the extra, the joke, the girl everyone thought would eventually disappear from the spotlight. I barely noticed when the crowd shifted, my focus still fixed on the floor like it held the answers to all my failures. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, startled, to see a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He looked deliberate, like someone who belonged in a story I hadn't been part of yet. "Hey," he said quietly, "just for me. Act like you're with me." I blinked. "Excuse me." He leaned a little closer, his voice low and calm. "Trust me. Follow my lead." Something in his tone didn't demand obedience. It offered it like a lifeline. For the first time that evening, I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. "You don't even know me," I muttered, skepticism prickling at the edges of my nerves. "I know enough," he said, eyes scanning the room as if he could already read the script everyone had written for me. "Let's give them a story they won't forget." For a moment, I just stared, uncertain if I was ready to step off the sidelines and into a scene I hadn't rehearsed for. But the idea was tempting. Tempting enough to make my heart beat faster, not from anxiety, but from the spark of possibility. And just like that, the stranger at table 12 became my unexpected ally. I glanced around the table, then back at him. "Okay, so what's the plan?" I asked, my voice low, a mix of curiosity and amusement. "Simple," he said, offering his arm. "We make it look real. Confidence first, charm second. Let them wonder what they're missing." I hesitated only a moment before taking it. Almost immediately, I noticed heads turning in our direction. Whispers started like soft wind, growing louder with each subtle smile, each natural laugh we shared. The same people who had barely spared me a glance now paused mid-conversation, their expressions shifting from polite disinterest to intrigue. Lily's eyes narrowed, and I felt a rush of satisfaction at the cornered look she wore like armor. I caught snippets of her muttering under her breath, the delicate veneer of her composure cracking ever so slightly. Andre, bless him, looked confused but impressed, probably wondering what he'd missed while watching his wife play the spotlight. We floated through the room, our gestures and casual touches choreographed yet effortless, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel like a punchline. People approached us, asking questions, smiling, even inviting me into conversations I'd been excluded from all evening. Each interaction felt like a small victory, a silent declaration that I wasn't invisible anymore. He leaned close at one point, whispering, "See? They're eating it up. Keep playing it cool." I laughed, the sound light and free, not the tense, forced noise I'd been making since stepping into the hall. By the time the music shifted, I realized the atmosphere had changed entirely. I wasn't just surviving the night anymore. I was commanding it. And Michael? He was no longer just a stranger. He was my partner in this little rebellion, and suddenly, The thought of standing by table 12 felt almost triumphant. The first notes of the slow song began, and suddenly the dance floor felt like a battlefield I was ready to claim. Michael extended his hand, and I took it, letting him lead me toward the center. The warmth of his hand, the confidence in his stride, it was intoxicating. Heads turned immediately, whispers following in our wake. Lily appeared at the edge of the floor, her eyes sharp, lips pressed in that thin line that always meant trouble. "Iris," she called, stepping forward as if she could reclaim the spotlight with a single word. "We're having a moment," he said politely but firmly, his tone brooking no argument. And just like that, she froze, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. For the first time all night, I saw her unsure, watching the narrative she'd so carefully controlled start to slip away. I moved with the music, matching his rhythm effortlessly, letting the ease between us speak louder than any argument. Guests leaned closer, caught up in the energy we radiated. Smiles replaced the polite nods I'd been used to, and even Andre seemed momentarily lost, unsure of how to navigate a scene he hadn't anticipated. By the time the song ended, Lily was retreating, her attempts to regain control failing silently in the background. I felt laughter bubbling up, a mixture of disbelief and triumph. I was no longer the girl they whispered about, the one they measured against my sister's perfection. I was in the center, fully present, fully alive, and for the first time in memory, the world seemed to bend toward me instead of away. And Michael? He just grinned, as if he'd known this was coming all along. Dinner rolled around, and for the first time that night, I wasn't being shepherded to a seat with a polite, just over here nod. Michael leaned in, his presence like a shield, and suddenly it wasn't about table 12 anymore. When we were seated, I caught Aunt Renee giving me a once-over that held something between surprise and respect. "Iris, ain't you something tonight?" she said with genuine admiration, and I laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. For once, the compliments weren't backhanded. They weren't reminders of what I lacked. They were acknowledgments of what I had claimed for myself. Conversations that had once skimmed over me now stopped in my orbit. Guests asked questions, smiled at my answers, and even the younger cousins leaned in, curious and engaged. I realized I was holding court without even trying, the energy around me shifting from tolerance to genuine interest. Lily tried to intercept, planting herself in the middle of the room with that familiar queenly poise, but every attempt to redirect attention failed. Michael's playful whispers and gentle touches made the ruse seamless, and I could feel the shift in the room as people stopped watching my sister and started watching me. By the time dessert arrived, the power dynamics had completely flipped. I was no longer the shadow of someone else's celebration. I was part of the story now, active and noticed, and it was thrilling. The evening wasn't over, but for the first time, I was living it on my own terms, and Michael, smiling knowingly beside me, made the entire transformation feel effortless. The second bouquet toss felt different somehow, and I realized I wasn't dreading it this time. The guests gathered, laughter and playful shouts filling the air, but my eyes were fixed on Michael. He winked, a subtle reminder that we were in this together. When the bouquet sailed through the air, I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, caught it with ease, and turned to face the room, holding it up like a trophy. Heads snapped in surprise, whispers rippling across the hall. Even Lily's jaw tightened, her expression unreadable, but I caught the flicker of defeat. For once, she had no script for me. Michael squeezed my hand lightly, leaning in. "Iris Williams, look at you, every eye on you, and you don't even know it," he murmured. I tried to act casual, tried to pretend I wasn't affected, but my chest betrayed me. My heart was thumping so loud I was sure he could hear it. The energy around us shifted completely. What had once been mockery and pity now radiated curiosity and admiration. People leaned in, eager to be part of the story that had just flipped in front of their eyes. I held the bouquet like a signal, a marker of ownership over the moment I'd reclaimed. It wasn't about outshining Lily anymore. It was about standing in my own light, claiming my place without apology. The chemistry between Michael and me felt electric, teasing the line between ruse and reality, and I couldn't help wondering if this entire night had been orchestrated for me to realize my own worth. As laughter and applause swirled around me, I caught Lily's eyes one last time. She was powerless now, and I was alive in a way I hadn't been before. Tonight wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving. Months later, I still smiled thinking about that night. Michael and I didn't just keep up the act. We built something real. What started as a clever ruse to reclaim dignity became laughter-filled mornings, late-night conversations, and a love that felt effortless and grounding. He knew my quirks, my stubborn streaks, my bad habits, and loved me anyway. Lily, of course, remained predictably dramatic about the entire saga, but it no longer mattered. Her attempts to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly, and watching her scramble while I thrived was quietly satisfying. I didn't need her approval anymore. I hadn't needed it then either. All I'd needed was to step into my own light. The wedding, with all its humiliation and tension, had been a turning point. I had discovered the power of standing tall, even when the world tried to keep me small. Every laugh, every sideways glance, every whispered compliment afterward reminded me that living well isn't just revenge, it's liberation. And then there was Michael. On a crisp autumn evening, I got a simple text from him, "Dinner tonight. I'll be waiting for you." When I arrived at the restaurant and gave my name, the hostess said, "Table 12. Terrace." A little shiver ran through me. Table 12, the same number where so much of our story had begun. And there he was, asking me to marry him under the Chicago skyline. I said yes without hesitation, knowing the life ahead would be ours to write, no scripts required. The irony is perfect. In trying to prove I was unlovable, she delivered me directly to the love of my life. Lily may have written the opening act, but I own the rest of the story, and finally, I got to live it on my terms, fully and unapologetically. And yes, I'm ridiculously excited to be Mrs. Williams Carter, because obviously, I'm hyphenating. Did you enjoy the story? If so, hit like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. Thanks for watching Revenge with Keisha. See you next time.